If Donald Trump gives unlawful orders to the U.S. military as commander-in-chief, will they resist? Will they ignore them? Will they stop Trump from trying to use U.S. military troops against civilians on domestic soil, which is against the law and the Constitution? I'm Michael Popak. This is the Legal AF YouTube channel. Now, more than ever, we need you to subscribe to keep us going on the other side now of the election. And I'm at the intersection, and I'm going to talk about the firewalls that we have, the levers that we have to contain an out-of-control Donald Trump, who never had a good relationship with the Department of Defense the first time around, didn't have a good relationship with the generals, fired many of them, accused many of them of treason after he left office, and even threatened to have at least one hanged and killed in the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Milley. But if they're given an order, don't they have to follow the commander-in-chief in the civilian chain of command? To remind people, or to lay it out for people from around the world that watch our channel, our military, unlike other countries, in order to avoid coups, in order to have civilians always in charge, that even the highest brass general, 5-star, even if they made a 6-star general, is still beneath a commanding commander-in-chief in the president and the head of the Department of Defense, Department of the Army, of the Navy, Air Force, Space Force, National Guard, Coast Guard, and the rest. Civilian control, civilian chain of command defines our military, and that's a good thing. We know from the first time around that General Milley had conversations with his counterpart in China and said, don't worry, we're not going to let Donald Trump start World War III, or words to that effect. That's the beginning of the end of the relationship between Donald Trump and General Mark Milley, by telling our enemies that I'm putting my hand between Donald Trump and the nuclear weapon. Good thing. That, of course, pissed off Donald Trump. Now, what if he does it again? We already know that the Pentagon, Lloyd Austin heading it as a former general, but now civilian, is already doing tabletop exercises, internal strategies of leadership about what would happen if Donald Trump gave an illegitimate order, an unlawful order. It's easy to walk through the scenario of Donald Trump as commander-in-chief, or the head of the Department of Defense will be some sort of meat puppet for Donald Trump, gives a lawful order. It's got to be followed, chain of command. That's what happens. They have a constitutional oath that they swore to uphold, to follow the chain of command and to protect this country. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an unlawful one. We know Donald Trump pushed the envelope last time. For instance, he had the park behind the White House cleared by the U.S. military, full-blown U.S. military, so he could make a photo op walk across the park to a church nearby with his upside-down Bible. Mark Milley at the time said he would never allow the military to ever get sucked into politics again. And Lloyd Austin, the Biden head of the Department of Defense, he just issued a memo on the eve of the election, or right after the election, telling his leadership and the command structure and all members of the military that he expects an orderly transition, that the military is the finest in the world, that they will remain independent, and I don't mean independent outside the chain of command, I mean independent not being political, that they will not allow themselves to get drawn into politics. Now, let's separate some things that Donald Trump has threatened or that are in Project 2025 and play out the illegal, unlawful order scenario, which also there's an oath for them not to follow an unlawful order. And you can see where the lawyers and the leadership are going to get together and talk about it. And it may not be at the Department of Defense level. I'm talking about the brass. I'm talking about the 3, 4, and 5-star generals and admirals. And what do they do when they get the unlawful order? Let's talk about an order. We'll walk through the scenario of lawful versus unlawful. Terrible game we have to play, but we're going to have to play it with Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to put U.S. military troops to strengthen our border, especially at the southern border, to help reinforce customs and border patrol resources. Let's just face facts. Nothing that Donald Trump wants to do, from deporting 11 million people to shoring up the southern border, can be done with the current budget and the current personnel. Let me repeat. The current budget and the current personnel are insufficient by about tenfold to do a deportation of 11 million people and to strengthen the southern border. Right. They're not in the amount of people that it would take. They'd have to bring in and hire immediately, and it will take years to hire the amount of people. The way to short circuit the budget and the allocation issue through Congress is to have the military do it. Order the military to the southern border on domestic soil on this side of the United States, of course, to shore up those things. Some people might think that sounds like a great idea. We should have the military on domestic soil. And then other people think, isn't that a violation of things like the Posse Comitatus Act, which is put in place right after the Civil War to make sure that we didn't use federal troops against American people or in American cities, even in this scenario? Now, Donald Trump will claim under the Alien Sedition and the Alien Espionage Act, or the Alien Sedition Act, sorry, that we're under attack. That these are people sneaking in through the chicken wire, the barbed fence, holding babies to try to get to freedom. We're under attack, and they have to be repelled by the military. That's sort of a gray area for ethicists within the military to guide the brass about whether that's lawful or unlawful. My belief is that while it's borderline unlawful, that the military will pick their battles, no pun intended, and that they will allow themselves to be deployed to the southern border. National Guard also falls into that category. What if he wants, though, let's take it to the next thing on the continuum. Donald Trump orders the military to take the lead in rounding up, processing, putting into internment camps, and deporting 11 million people. That would, by the way, even if you employed the entire military to do that, it would take a couple of years, lots of planning. It wouldn't happen on day one, as Donald Trump likes to say. It would happen, if it happened in day 366, I would be shocked, even with the military. And every resource that Donald Trump would deploy from the military to handle his deportation fantasy is making us less safe in national security. It's compromising our national security. It's one less war that they can fight because they're fighting the war for Donald Trump politically. So now we're into the area along the continuum where I see this as being not only an unlawful order of the commander-in-chief and of his civilian leadership below him, but one that the brass and the military may sort of link arms and oppose. Now, what could they do? They could not follow through with it. Donald Trump could start mass firings of generals and admirals. He could promote people that are Trumpers. You can even move them up from the bottom. Why not? Take a lieutenant, take a captain, make him a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star general overnight. Commander-in-chief can do whatever he wants. And he's immune from being sued and or from criminal prosecution related to it based on this United States Supreme Court decision over the summer. So, but, listen, there's going to be, you think protests in the streets happened the first Trump administration? Wait till you see this one, when he tries to use the military, who have resisted, and there's resignations in order to avoid deployment for a civilian operation on domestic soil to round up human beings, other human beings who are looking to live in dignity. And as I said, it's not just finding them, it's finding them, processing them, putting them into temporary housing, which is a concentration camp, and then deporting them and coordinating the politics and the diplomacy of it on the other side. What do you mean? You just show up in Mexico and open the doors and say, here? I don't think that's how travel works, nor how a giant transport plane holding a lot of illegal people with little or no identity or identification in another country, some of which they've never lived in. I don't think that's how that's going to work. Okay, so that's where I think we're going to start seeing line drawing by the U.S. military, the civilian brass, most of whom do not respect Donald Trump, don't think he's a threat to America, and are going to be on high alert not to follow unlawful orders. Now let's take it along the continuum from there, where I think they're going to draw a line in the sand, to the next place Donald Trump in Project 2025 have threatened to use the U.S. military against its own people. This is under the enemy within. Right? The enemy within, the liberal media, the liberal, radical liberals, the people that were my enemies, Donald Trump's ever expanding who was naughty and who was nice list, like he's some demented Santa Claus, that list, right? And so what is he going to do? He's going to use the military to shut down operations. He's going to send the military forcibly through over governor objections in blue states to have them work on crime, to put people in jail, to jail journalists who are also the enemy within and the enemy of the people, according to Donald Trump. See, there, I think it goes beyond mass resignations of the military. I think you may see a general take to the podium in the public square and say, we cannot follow this unlawful order and will not. Now, Donald Trump will threaten court-martial and maybe even a firing squad or whatever, but I think it's at a certain point, the brass, which is by and large not apolitical and certainly not Trumpers, would step in. They know Donald Trump has made disparaging comments about the military brass, wounded war heroes, veterans, soldiers, John McCain, and the rest. And I think it all kind of comes home to roost on as the order gets more unlawful as they move forward. I mean, let's remember, within a month of the election, 2 generals who worked under Donald Trump, General Milley and General Kelly, both 4-star plus generals, said that Donald Trump's a fascist and he shouldn't get anywhere near the White House ever again. Even Mark Esper, one of a revolving